In this video, I'm going to share with you my top tips for painting in the snow and how to channel that excitement of being outside and make a painting. Stick around to see how I made this oil painting, but first let's look at my top 4 tips on painting snow. My first tip is to pick a day where there's not much blue in the sky, or maybe none at all. This might be a surprising top tip, but I find it's really important because blue can really take over the whole scene and become the focal point. So instead, have blue be a subtle part of the picture plan and take good reference so that the blue doesn't take over the painting. Here you can see how I worked up a strong blue in the sky Telluride painting and just modified it a little so that it allowed the viewer's eye to move around the painting easily. I get really excited when I see a winter scene and I kind of want to paint all different aspects of what I see. I want to do the puffy snow, the contrast of the trees. But hold on a minute. I have to be careful of that excitement because the problem with a snow scene is that there's a lot of detail that can happen, and my excitement can turn to frustration because of all of the details and complexity. So let's keep working on ways to simplify the scene and make good progress with snow scenes. Second tip is to seek variety. Maybe you think a gray scene with no blue sky is going to be too boring, but a snow scene doesn't have to be boring with reduced amount of chroma. Here in these examples, you could see that the one on the left just has more interesting shapes, texture, and variety. Humans see black and white first and then color. Painting on a gray day like this with overcast conditions is really great for understanding the structure of your painting. My third tip is to really use the gray groups wisely, meaning light, medium, and dark. I have this beat up value scale that shows a lot of master paintings I've looked at over the years to try to understand this concept further. Claude Monet did some wonderful snow scenes, and sometimes he used a little more color, but if we look at this in black and white, we could see the shapes are so strong and simple, and he's really grouping together his masses. These two haystacks are tied together. Now you can see some examples that I've done of images from Telluride. I was not relying on strong color to make these paintings, but really just enjoying the nuances of the gray scene that I saw. Next up is to understand some of the curves that you're going to see in the landscape and where the picture planes are going to be divided. And finally, my fourth tip is finding a C or Z zigzag shape in the landscape. We're basically talking about perspective going in the distance. I have a watercolor example and an oil example. These both show curves on the landscape and perspective going back. I'm Christine Lashley, and I love to teach people how to paint, and especially to paint outdoors and be their best creative selves. I've been a teacher for 30 years, and I appreciate you being here on YouTube. I've probably painted about 1,000 paintings on location and even painted in different places around the world. I've painted so many snow paintings. They're tons of fun to paint. Don't forget, you can also paint outside your window. So it's kind of like painting outside or plein air, but then you have the comfort of being indoors. So that's one of my favorite ways to paint. Okay, well, now that we understand our snow concepts a little bit more, let's watch this demo come together. To begin, I want to have a toning wash and try to establish some of my main shapes. When I'm doing my shapes, I don't worry about mistakes. This is the time to try out a C, maybe a V, or a Z is going to work the best. It just depends on making the maximum variety possible. I'll usually work from one primary photo, but there's times when I work from multiple photo sources, up to about 30. And in this case, it was based on a strong memory of walking along this stream. So I do want to mention that because it's not just this one specific photo that I am copying. It's really an interpretation. In the beginning, it's super important to just latch onto a strong shape that you feel is a major point of interest in the painting. In this case, it was the riverbank and some of those beautiful curves that I saw. And I spent a lot of time getting those edges just right. I feel like that's time well spent with my painting and getting the pieces in position. Now I'm ready to switch to more full paint. So I am thinking of, okay, I've established my dark. Now I'm going to just switch to my light. And here I have the left snowbank with titanium white, cobalt, and a little bit of transparent oxide and cad yellow. I'm still working on refining the curve of the riverbank and just spending some time making sure that I have the C that I want or that V shape. And I know I just keep thinking about that during this demo, but really in a winter scene, especially like this one, that's just one of the key components. I want to use a medium value for the far trees. Here you can see me holding up the value scale. And now that I have the snow in place, I'm just going to turn my attention to that background layer. The sky is a more muted blue. So we had looked at the role that a diminished blue can play in controlling the viewer's experience of the snow scene. And I'm using a larger bristle brush. This is a number 6 filbert to just kind of scruff in that medium brown, which is mixed from cobalt, transparent oxide, cad yellow, a touch of the azo coral, and titanium white. Well, the basic shapes are coming together, and I am going to turn my attention to that far mountain plain. It's not really apparent in the photo, but indicative of that area is a mountainous view in the background, and I just thought it was important to put in. So here also I'm working on the shadows, and I'm going to spend some time working into the wet paint. Now comes an important step in creating the painting, which is having a three-dimensional or sculptural quality to the snow. I want to show areas that are submerged in the water. Kind of this, is it ice? Is it a snow puddle on top? Um, so I am developing all of this with wet and wet paint. And now I'm finally starting to add just a few highlights, but then I blend all of this together and switch mindset into doing some grasses because I've decided I want to put in some thin passages of paint and introduce a few verticals before I finish developing the snow. The river is the most important, snow is second, and therefore all of the texture and the planes going back into the distance, foreground, middle ground, and background, need to contribute to the feeling of snow. So in the foreground is going to be the brightest snow, and again, developing that three-dimensional nature of the snow. I did some color correcting of my lights and I've brought in the palette. This is a second day working on the painting, and I do like working on semi-wet artwork. It kind of has a cling to it. It's a really good technique for getting some of that texture and scruffiness of the snow. I'm spending some time with top notes of my brush marks. I do have a clean brush. This is a number 4 synthetic flat. It comes to a sharp tip. And I have a warm white, and now I'm mixing a cooler white. I want this to be kind of a purple, but I don't have as many highlights and lowlights or shadows. Now is the time to add dimples in the snow and create that three-dimensional look of the snow I was talking about before. The initial snow concepts that we talked about in the early part of the video are all coming into play now, with working with good value, diminishing the chroma, using interesting shapes, and having a sense of moving back in space using good perspective curves. Because some things have been painted out or reshaped, it's time to add back in the grasses and maybe add a few icy brush marks to the trees. This again will contribute to the texture of the artwork. It's not just about one passage of the painting, but everything has to match. I do want the most texture in the foreground and less texture as I go back. So as I add the different dots of little patches of snow, I want that continuity moving into the background. The more layers that get developed with the snow, kind of the thicker and chunkier the paint looks. There's times when I'll put on several passages of paint, but this particular painting only had 2 passages of paint. It was the first one with a thin layer moving into wet and wet, and now with the second day adding these final areas of paint. To finish a painting, I just look for a good sense of balance. I'm still looking for the unity and the variety, but yet the balance has to be all passages are believable and that they fit together. I'd say my number one challenge has been really understanding how to use value, and snow scenes have really helped me to get better at that specific task. Well, I think things are on track here and things are looking good. So I did sign the painting while everything was wet, and I hope you enjoyed the demo. I hope you found these tips and techniques helpful. Thanks for being here.